Welcome everyone to another episode of Slasher Scotty. I am your host, Scotty McCoy, and boy, do I have a surprise for all of you. I have on Zoom with me right now Marc Sheffler, and he played Junior Stillo in The Last House on the Left, the original one. Hey, Marc, how you doing today?
I'm fine, and it's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
Awesome, not a problem. So glad to have you on. First question I got for you: how did you get your start into acting?
I think I started my acting career when I learned how to play characters and wiggle out of trouble when I was a little kid. I found that if I could divert attention away from whatever had happened by mimicking some character from television, that my parents, my father especially, would just let go of whatever it was he wanted to tell me and start being entertained. So it's been something that I've always wanted to do. And I kind of I aim myself. I tell people that all the time, that nothing happens by accident. And if you really want this or anything in life, that once you recognize it, you sort of have to aim yourself there.
Mm-hmm.
And so I did. And, I was very lucky that I had a father who was like unbelievably supportive of me.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not in my regular house. I'm actually in Colombia right now, the country of Colombia.
Yeah.
In my mother-in-law's house outside of Bogota. So
Okay.
I don't have around me all the stuff that I usually do when I do podcasts. One of which is a picture of me and the Three Stooges when I was 10 years old.
Nice.
Because my father hired them to perform at my birthday party.
Nice.
So and then they brought me up on stage, and I that was probably the actual moment when I look back and I say, well, how did I get here? And how did I even know I wanted to be here, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think probably that moment of being on stage at 10 with the Stooges in front of an audience, that was loving it.
Yeah.
Probably, first one's free, right? So
Yep.
that was pretty much my version of tripping out in an opium den, right, for the first time.
Nice. That's awesome. So what was your audition like for The Last House on the Left?
So I had a manager in New York who actually was in the movie, the guy who played Dr. Collingwood, Dick Towers, who was just the sweetheart of sweetheart guys. And he was my manager. He worked for a company called Lloyd Greenfield and Associates. They had Tom Jones and Engelbert Humperdinck at the time. So they were a pretty big name management agency.
Mm-hmm.
And they had me and some other theatrical clients. And I was doing a stand-up. I was, starting my stand-up career. So I walked into Dick's office one day and he said, "Hello, darling, I have an audition for you." And I say, it was very New York theatrical, this guy. He was just fucking great. And I'd say, where? He said, "I want you to go down to 56th Street, 53rd Street, somewhere. Anyway, I have it written down here. Go down there and go into this building at this address. Go up to the 6th floor, I believe. Yes, I have it written down, 6th floor. And ask for two fellows. One is named Wes and the other is named Sean. And you tell them I sent you." So I take the slip of paper and I go down and I go into the building, go follow Dick's instructions, go up. I meet a long, blonde, shaggy haired guy, stringy blonde hair, skinny guy, hippie looking fella, and another shorter guy with a mustache, a little chubby. And he was dressed kind of, just like with a regular shirt and a pair of pants. The other guy was in, I think, a t-shirt and some kind of ratty blue jeans. And that guy was Wes, and then this other guy was Sean. And they told me what they were doing, and they made me read the scene, the dream scene in Last House, where I'm dreaming about the horrors that happen.
Right.
And I did it. I shook hands with them. I said, "Thanks a lot for the opportunity," and they said, "No problem." And then I went downstairs, and by the time I had gotten back to Dick's office, when I walked in, well, darling, apparently you impressed them." I said, "What?" He said, "They want you."
Nice.
And I said, "Are you fucking kidding me?" He said, nope, you're going to go to Connecticut for 4 weeks and you're going to make a movie. And I said, "Get the fuck out of here," right?
Nice.
So yeah, that's basically what happened, man.
Wow.
That's the truth of it. Hey, I
Right.
didn't know. I don't know if you know this, that but tomorrow, Last House is screening at the Museum of Modern Art in New York City. A
Nice.
friend of mine, it's unfucking believable. A friend of mine sent me
Hmm.
a flyer,
Hmm.
and I looked at it, and the museum is doing an exhibition on visceral films. You know, films that reach out and touch the flesh of human beings, right?
Hmm.
You know, in some way,
Right.
and like in Casablanca, of all the gin joints in all the world, she had to walk into mine. Like of all the horror films and slasher films and shit
Yeah.
that's been made, over the
Hmm.
last 5 decades, they picked ours. And I'm like seriously blown away by that, right? Like,
Yeah.
all the hoopla about it, that's fine. And mostly it's West, and I
Hmm.
was just a part of it. But this one thing about being part of an exhibit at the Museum of Modern Art, that this is sort of
Hmm.
like personally tripping me. It's making me a
Yeah.
fanboy of myself, if it makes any sense.
Nice. Yeah, I agree. So, speaking of Wes and Sean, how was Wes as a director, and what was it like working with Sean, who was the producer on the film?
Okay, those are two different answers.
Okay.
Um, Wes, you got to remember that and I tell people this all the time, when we were doing Last House, Wes Craven wasn't Wes Craven.
Right.
Wes Craven was just this guy named Wes who's going to
Hmm.
direct this that he wrote.
Yep. At
So,
least 10 years before Nightmare on Elm Street.
oh yeah, and
Yep.
first of all, he was this. I've been very lucky. I've come in contact with
Hmm.
99.9% just really nice people, just people who
Yeah.
are, you know, just regular people who have sort of irregular jobs, right?
Hmm.
So he was great. It was a learning experience for him. He knew what he wanted all the time. He
Hmm.
knew, like everybody who ends up being good, you always know in your head and in your heart what you
Hmm.
want, and then the experience part is learning the mechanics of how
Yeah.
to get there, right?
Yeah.
And Sean is an excellent producer. I mean, he had made one feature before that. It was like a documentary, a pseudo documentary called Together, which was this kind of, I guess you could say, a send up on all the Kinsey report
Hmm.
sex stuff, that he did.
Right.
And I think he's become a very good producer. I
Hmm.
would trust anything that he was producing
Hmm.
to get made well and come
Hmm.
in, on time
Yep.
and on budget.
Right. And I mean, like you mentioned, this is, at least 10 years or so before Nightmare for Wes and decades before Scream. And with Sean,
Oh,
it was like
absolutely.
7 or 8 years before Friday the 13th. So at the time when this movie was being made, they weren't, Sean
No,
Cunningham and Wes Craven.
right. And we were all, this was all like a master class of learning
Hmm.
experience for us,
Yeah.
because we were, I tell people all the time, we didn't know what we didn't know.
Yeah.
And that made it really easy for us to just try anything,
Hmm. Yeah.
to get what Wes wanted.
Yeah.
You know,
Absolutely.
that's what we did. And that's one of the reasons why I think the film has had an incredible life.
Hmm.
The screening at the museum, just it's still going.
Yeah. Absolutely.
50 years later, it's still going.
Yeah, absolutely. So we know that your death scene was getting you shot yourself. So how were the effects done for that?
Well, they were very kind of what's known as on the day effects, right?
Hmm.
The nothing in post. So what they did was, if you remember how it was shot,
Hmm.
they kept cutting back and forth between David, who was egging me on to shoot myself, me holding the gun, and then
Hmm.
a side shot. And as he moved closer to me, we got closer, obviously, and then it goes through a shot of his face, and then there's a gunshot off camera, and then it's back to me after, immediately afterwards. So we shot the front part, and then we took a break, as I recall, and then they sewed, they had a latex impression of what my brain might look like, the victim of a gunshot, right? And they took my hair, and there were perforations all the way around it, and they took my strands of my hair, which was quite long, and they ran them through. They basically sewed the thing into the back of my head.
Nice.
And then dressed it with stage blood and some bone fragments and whatever. And so they were able to capture that. So if you remember, there's that scene where I slide down the wall, and there's a blood streak that, you know, follows my head. And that's because they had put all that stage blood on my head, so that when I did that, that would leave that trail.
Nice.
So I had to remember that dead as I was, I had to press my head up against the wall.
So what was the best?
I can remember Wes saying, "Don't forget to press your head up against the wall. We need that shot." Okay. But you're dead. You're dead. So just pray, you know, like you're back.
Right. Nice. Yeah, that was a really good shot. And I mean, it's simple to make, but I mean, people, like, when you look at it, it looks more complex than it really is. But it's all on the actor. It's all on the actor, because they need to make it look legit without acting like they're alive.
Yeah, we didn't have the luxury of you know, either obviously the technology that exists today, or even anything more than, like, you know, traditional movie makeup stuff. We didn't, you know, we use, you know, bags and tubes and, you know, shit that was been around, you know, processes that have been around for years, but we didn't have anything really fancy. You know, we didn't have any squibs or anything, like, you know, like nothing like that. It was very old school. And in a way, you know, I talk about it at conventions. I talk about why I think Last House had such a multi-sensory impact, right? And I believe that it's the simplicity of it, like you just said. I think that it's not a video game. You know, it doesn't look like screen violence that takes on the sub narrative of being sort of like a video game, right? This and to Wes's credit, it was always his intention to bring this horrible violence downstage center, right, and put it right in front of people's faces and say, hey, this is what it really looks like.
Yep. And the likes of, like, Halloween having a budget of 300,000 or so, and Friday the 13th of 550,000 or so, Nightmare on Elm Street having a smaller budget. This film is way smaller than those other films, even. And those were small budgets.
$93,000.
Yeah. And it did pretty decent. It made its money back and then some.
It's if not anymore, it was at one time the highest, or there's this thing called the ROI number, right? Return on investment number. So it, I believe, had like the highest ROI ratio for a long time. It still might, but it did for, I know it did for a long time.
Yeah, absolutely.
It cost $93,000, and they've made probably 70 million from it.
Yeah, absolutely. Astronomical amounts compared to what it was made with.
It's all profit now, because everything is delivered digitally, and so you know, there's no shipping costs. No, you know, it used to be you'd have to, if you made a movie like when Last House broke, it was originally made to be part of a double feature for a chain of drive-ins in New England, a company called Hallmark Releasing, and they ran their numbers and realized if they put this amount of money, meaning the 93,000, into it, that they could run this film in their own theaters over X amount of years, and they make their money back, and then they could sell off the rights. And so they had it figured out pretty much that for this number, it had an intrinsic value, right? It was worth more made than not made. So what happened was, we did that. That's exactly what happened. And then, like 3 months or so, I want to say, after the actual release date, Roger Ebert writes a 3.5 out of 4-star review of Last House. And when I use the word literally overnight, I actually mean literally overnight. Everything changed. I walked into Sean's office on that day, and he was running around like a lunatic trying to figure out how he was going to fill an order for 800 prints, you know? because everybody wanted to see it now. And
Yeah.
for about 2 weeks, it was a top 10 movie in the United
Yeah.
States. It was, so
Yeah.
that's again kind of trippy for me.
Yeah, absolutely. So what was the best part about filming Last House on the Left, and what was the worst?
What was the best part of your
What
question?
what was the best part of filming it, and what was the worst?
Well, the best part of filming was the fact that I was filming it,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
And there was no worst part.
Mhm.
It didn't have never had a worst part.
Nice.
It taught me a great deal.
Mhm.
Uh, I became friends with Wes and Sean, and
Yeah.
I mean, David Hess became like the big brother I never had. Marty
Right.
Cove, Jeremy
Yeah.
Rain, Fred Lincoln. I made lifelong friends. I mean,
Yeah.
there was literally nothing. There was no worst part of
Mhm.
it at all.
Nice. Absolutely. And you got to be in a cult classic. Like, there's not many that can say they were in an actual cult classic.
There you go.
Yep.
That's that's it's funny. It's like I've had this weird kind of career that I call my very successful mediocre career. And what I mean by that is that, yeah, I haven't made a ton of movies. However, the one movie that I really was part of is an actual part of American film history,
Yeah.
and is a seriously well
Mhm.
represented cult film. So,
Absolutely.
and it's like, like in my entire 50 plus year career in show business as a professional, I've only been hit on by one gay man. But no, because you hear about things like, this, but it's all nonsense. But I've
Right.
only been hit on by one gay man in
Nice.
my entire. However, the one gay man who did hit on me was Liberace, and
Nice.
in front of lots of people. So there are
That's
witnesses to
awesome.
this.
That's
So
awesome.
I've had that kind of weird career where
Mhm.
I find myself in really rarefied
Mhm.
space at times, and wondering just what the fuck am I doing here? Yeah.
That's
Oh, really?
awesome.
And I still like that.
Mhm.
Even though I've been through everything, and yeah, I've had a pretty good career and I earned it and
Mhm.
whatever. I still, like I still sometimes go to places and just look around and say, what am I doing here? And then somebody, some
Mhm.
celebrity I know comes up and says, "Hey man, how you doing? How have you been? What's going on?" And I say,
Right.
oh yeah, I belong here. Right, that's it.
Yeah, absolutely. So obviously you were in the original of the film, but there was also a remake of the same film. So did you see
That's
that
correct.
remake, and what did you think of it
I
compared to the original?
Okay. I avoided seeing it
Hmm.
because I'm not a big fan of remakes,
Yeah.
and I'm just not, especially if it was something, a remake of a film that kind of was okay but didn't work with an
Hmm.
updated cast, I can see. But what we did was very hard to replicate because it
Yeah.
was the time, it was the time in the country, it was it was every factor. It was the way we shot it. It was Wes's inexperience. It was, the fact that we all of us were unknowns and
Hmm.
nobody knew who the fuck we were. And so we're like, people, were these real people? I mean, it was a whole bunch of factors.
Hmm.
So I didn't really want to see it, but then a company, a film magazine out of England,
Hmm.
contacted me and wanted to know if I would write a compare and contrast
Hmm.
article, comparing the original with the second one. So
Hmm.
then I did sit down and watch it, and watching it led me to my opening statement in the article, which was,
Hmm.
my biggest question is, if the first film didn't exist, would this second film stand alone on its own feet, right?
Hmm.
And I didn't think that was true with the
Hmm.
remake. I thought it was overproduced. I think, I no disrespect to the guy who directed it, but I think he was more interested in shots than
Hmm.
telling a story,
Hmm.
and that when you take a story that's so visceral and
Yeah.
emotionally gut-wrenching as the bare bones story of Last House. And then you trick it up with fancy camera shots and, you know, effects and
Yeah.
all kinds of shit. You dilute it, you know, that's what what I use the term overproduced is you made more out of it than it needed to be. And in doing so, you took away from its rawness, you know, you took away from what it was really about. So that's my only, it's not even a criticism, it's just a personal point of view, you know. It's
and I agree. I mean, with all these reboots and remakes happening, like Nightmare on Elm Street from 2010, that completely like obliterated the what the 1984 film, the original, was about. Like, it just wasn't good. And like, why are they trying to ruin these classics? Leave them in the 80s. Let us remember them. If you want to do something new, create a sequel if you have to. Like, don't remake the original.
Tell an origin story or something, but what I didn't take to, you know, and I hate to use the words like I hated it, I liked it, because that's personal judgment. So let me just say that what I didn't respond to as I guess a member of the audience and as somebody who was in the original was that kind of overproduction of it. It just to me diluted and took away from just how tragic the story was.
Right. Yeah. You know? Absolutely. I completely agree. And sometimes, like, you know, movies aren't meant to be rebooted. If anything, tell a different story based on that, but don't redo the story.
It's like, to me, you know, I also wrote in the article, I said, it's like, you know, to me, like sometimes rewriting a book that, you know, doing like Moby Dick 2022, right? Like, what? How would that make any sense?
Right.
You know,
exactly. So or why like
needed to be when it took place, because that was part of the struggle, right? So I don't know.
Yeah, that's like you know, somebody saying, hey, I'm gonna rewrite and release a book, redo The Shining or redo Pet Cemetery and make it my own. Like, why? It's a classic. Leave it alone.
Something else. Just I agree with you. Just leave it alone, please. Just, you know.
Exactly. So the last question. Go ahead.
Walks into I'm saying nobody walks into the Louvre, looks up at a Rembrandt, says, "Yeah, they got to repaint that."
Right. Exactly. Absolutely. So the last question I do got for you is, do you have any other projects in the works to promote to the listening viewing audience? Any convention appearances, websites, or social media accounts to promote as well?
I am on Facebook and Instagram.
Okay.
And I'm writing a book right now. I'm writing a fictionalized version of 7 years of my life between the time I was 14 and 21, that begins with this kind of father and son promise deal agreement that one of these days I was going to star in a movie that's going to be up on a screen in a certain theater in Pittsburgh where I grew up. To 7 years later, when that actually happened, and it's the journey from that, from the promise to the reality, you know. So I just finished the first year, and you know, it just proved to myself that I could write it.
Awesome.
That's what I'm doing.
Awesome. Sounds good. So I thank you so much, Marc, for joining me. Stay tuned to Marc's social media to find out when the book is ready for release. Where you can get it. Definitely.
It's called Those 7 Years.
Awesome. Sounds good. I thank you so much, Marc, for joining me today.
All right, man.
You bet. You have a great rest of your day.
You as well.
All right. Bye.